The orphan's new home. In a village nestled between rolling hills and golden fields, the sound of children's laughter filled the air. The people of Yumis were known for their strong traditions, their respect for the land, and their deep sense of community. Among them lived Nedi and Ifeoma, a couple whose kindness was spoken of far and wide. Their home was warm, their hearts generous, but their lives felt incomplete. They had no child to share their love with. For years, Nedi and Ifeoma prayed to the gods for a child. They visited elders, sought blessings, and poured their love into their farm, hoping that one day, their prayers would be answered. But as time passed, they realized that perhaps fate had a different plan for them. One day, while visiting the market, they overheard a conversation about an orphanage in the neighboring village. It was a place where children who had lost their parents found temporary shelter. Their hearts ached at the thought of a child growing up without love, and in that moment, they made a decision: if they could not bear a child, they would find one to love. A new beginning. The journey to the orphanage took several hours, and when they arrived, they were met with the sight of children playing in the yard. Some were laughing, some were chasing one another, and others sat quietly, watching from a distance. Among them, a girl with bright eyes and a cautious smile stood apart from the rest. She looked no older than 8, with short, curly hair and a slender frame that suggested hardship. She watched the couple with curiosity, clutching a small, tattered doll to her chest. "What is your name, child?" Ifeoma asked gently. "Oma," the girl replied, her voice soft but steady. As they spoke with the caretaker, they learned that Oma had been left at the orphanage as a baby. No one knew where she came from or who her parents were. Life at the orphanage had been hard, but she had grown into a quiet, observant child, always willing to help the younger ones. There was something about Oma that tugged at Ifeoma's heart, a quiet strength, a spark of resilience. "Would you like to come home with us, Oma?" Nedi asked. The girl's eyes widened. She had dreamed of a family, but she never truly believed it would happen. She hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "Yes, please." And so, hand in hand, Nedi and Ifeoma led Oma out of the orphanage, towards the home that would soon be hers. A home full of love. From the moment she stepped into their house, Oma felt something she had never known before: belonging. The house was filled with warmth, the scent of freshly baked bread, and the laughter of her new parents. At first, Oma was hesitant, unsure if this happiness would last. She had seen other children in the orphanage adopted, only to be returned when they did not meet expectations. Would she be enough? But Nedi and Ifeoma never made her feel unwanted. Ifeoma taught her how to cook, showing her how to grind spices and knead dough for the village's special yam cakes. Nedi took her to the farm, showing her the vast field of maize, yams, and cassava. "You see these crops," he said one day, placing a hand on her shoulder. "They grow strong because they are given love, care, and patience. Just like you, Oma." For the first time, Oma began to believe that she was truly home. The tragedy that changed everything. But happiness, like the seasons, does not last forever. One fateful evening, a storm rolled in, fierce and unforgiving. The winds howled, the sky darkened, and the rain poured relentlessly. Nedi and Ifeoma had gone to the market that afternoon, but as night fell, they did not return. Oma waited by the door, heart pounding. The next morning, the village chief came to the house, his face grim. "There was an accident on the road," he said, his voice heavy with sorrow. "The river flooded. Nedi and Ifeoma, they did not make it." The words crushed Oma's world in an instant. The home that had once been filled with laughter now echoed with silence. She sat by the door for hours, waiting, hoping that somehow, it was a mistake. But they never came back. The villagers mourned Nedi and Ifeoma, honoring them for their kindness and generosity. But after the ceremonies ended, Omar was left alone and orphan once more. And then came the whispers. Aunt Adana arrives. Among the mourners was Aunt Adana, Nedy's distant cousin, a woman with sharp eyes and a smile that never reached them. She stepped forward, placing a hand on Omar's shoulder, her grip firm. "Poor child," she said. "Don't worry. You will not be alone. I will take care of you." Omar, still drowning in grief, did not resist. Perhaps this woman would offer her the warmth she had lost. But as Aunt Adana led her away, something in the woman's gaze sent a shiver down Omar's spine. And as the doors of her new home closed behind her, Omar had no idea that her suffering was only just beginning. Betrayed and cast out. As the sun set behind the hills, casting a golden glow over the village, Omar followed Aunt Adana into her new home. The house was larger than Nedy and Ifeoma's, with walls adorned with elaborate carvings and floors made of polished wood. But despite its grandeur, it lacked warmth. There was no laughter, no scent of freshly baked bread, no gentle hands to ruffle her hair. The moment the door closed, Aunt Adana's kind smile faded. Her gaze turned cold, assessing Omar as though she were a stray dog that had wandered into her home. "You will earn your place here," she said, her voice sharp as a blade. Omar's heart sank. A life of hardship. From that moment on, Omar's life changed. She was no longer a daughter but a servant. While Aunt Adana and her children, Nkem, Obi, and Chinyo, ate lavish meals, Omar was given scraps. While they slept on soft mats under warm blankets, Omar was forced to sleep in a small corner of the storage room, surrounded by sacks of grain. Each day, before the sun rose, Aunt Adana's voice would cut through the silence. "Omar, get up. There is work to do." She was made to sweep the house, fetch water from the stream, wash clothes, and tend to the farm. She worked until her hands were raw, her feet sore, and her stomach empty. Whenever she hesitated or showed signs of exhaustion, Aunt Adana would sneer. "You should be grateful. We took you in. Without us, you would have nothing." Omar swallowed her pain. She had no choice but to endure. She knew that no one in the village would help her. Aunt Adana had convinced them all that she was merely disciplining a lazy child. But in the quiet of the night, as she lay on the cold floor, Omar whispered to herself, "I will not break." She refused to let them crush her spirit. The farm falls into greedy hands. As weeks passed, Aunt Adana's greed began to show. The vast farmland that once belonged to Nedy and Ifeoma was now under her control. At first, she promised to care for it, saying it was for the good of the family. But soon, she began selling off sections of the land to the wealthiest traders. The farm workers, once treated with kindness and respect, were now underpaid and overworked. Many left, unable to tolerate the changes. The farm, once thriving, began to wither under Aunt Adana's rule. Omar watched helplessly. She wanted to fight back, to remind the villagers of Nedy and Ifeoma's vision, but she had no power. "You are nothing," Aunt Adana reminded her constantly. "You have no real claim to this land. You were adopted. You are not one of us." Her words stung like a whip. But Omar clenched her fist, refusing to let them see her cry. A dark scheme. One evening, as Omar carried a heavy basket of yams from the fields, she overheard a conversation between Aunt Adana and her eldest son, Nkem. "We must make sure the girl never challenges us," Aunt Adana said in a hushed but urgent tone. "But what if she tells the elders about what we've done?" Nkem asked. Aunt Adana scoffed. "Who will believe her? She is nothing more than an orphan we took pity on. The villagers already see her as an outsider." Omar's heart pounded. She realized the truth. Aunt Adana had no intention of ever letting her have a place in the family. She was being used. And when she was no longer useful, they would discard her. That night, Oma knew she had to leave the cruel exile. The next morning, the village awoke to a shocking accusation. Aunt Adana gathered the elders, her voice trembling with fake sorrow. Oma has betrayed us, she declared before the village square. She has been stealing from the farm, taking what does not belong to her. Gasps filled the air. Oma, who had been tending to the fields, arrived to find a crowd gathered, their eyes full of suspicion. That's not true, Oma protested, her voice desperate. But Aunt Adana was skilled in deception. She wants to take the farm for herself, she said, shaking her head in disappointment. She was adopted, but that does not make her a true daughter of this family. She has no right to claim what is ours. The elders hesitated. Some of them had seen how the farm had suffered under Adana's rule. Some had quietly admired Oma's resilience. But they also feared defying Adana, a woman known for her sharp tongue and cunning mind. Finally, the village chief spoke. Oma, these accusations are serious. While we do not know if you are guilty, it is clear that your presence here causes conflict. It is best that you leave. Oma's breath caught in her throat. She looked around, hoping someone, anyone, would defend her. But no one did. Her heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. She had lost everything. Again. Alone in the world. With nothing but the clothes on her back, Oma walked away from the only home she had ever known. As she reached the outskirts of the village, tears blurred her vision. But she refused to let them fall. She turned back one last time, staring at the land that had once been filled with love and laughter. I will come back, she whispered, her voice filled with quiet determination. And I will take back what is mine. With that, she stepped into the unknown, alone but unbroken. Her journey was just beginning. The orphan's struggle. The road stretched long and empty before Oma as she walked away from the village, her heart heavy with betrayal. She had nothing left, no family, no home, and no place to call her own. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, but Oma felt no warmth from its beauty. She walked until her legs ached, until the village disappeared behind her. She didn't know where she was going. She only knew she could not stop. Her stomach rumbled, but she had no food. The clothes on her back were all she owned. The night wind was cold, and with no place to sleep, she curled up beneath a large tree, wrapping her arms around herself. That night, as she lay on the cold earth, she made a silent promise to herself. They have taken everything from me. But they will not take my will to survive. A stranger's kindness. The next morning, Oma woke to the sound of birds chirping in the trees above her. Her body ached, but she forced herself to keep moving. She walked for hours until she reached the edge of another village. It was much smaller than her own, with huts made of red clay and thatched roofs, and people moving about their daily chores. As she walked through the market square, the smell of roasted yams and groundnut soup filled the air. Her stomach twisted painfully. She stood near a food stall, watching as a woman sold hot yams to eager customers. The hunger in her belly was unbearable. But she had no money. The woman behind the stall noticed her staring. She was old, with kind eyes and deep wrinkles that told of many years lived. You are hungry, child, the woman said gently. Oma hesitated, embarrassed, but nodded. The woman smiled and handed her a roasted yam wrapped in leaves. Eat. Oma's eyes filled with tears. No one had shown her kindness in a long time. Thank you, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. As she ate, the woman watched her carefully. You are not from here, she said. Where is your family? Oma looked down. She didn't know how to answer. After a long silence, she simply said, I have no family. The old woman's face softened. Then come with me. A new home with Mama Getchi. The old woman's name was Momankechi, and she lived at the far end of the village in a small hut surrounded by a garden filled with herbs and vegetables. I am a healer, Momankechi explained as she led Oma inside. People come to me for medicine, and I help them as best I can. The hut was simple, but it was warm and smelled of dried leaves and spices. You can stay here if you are willing to walk, Momankechi said. Oma nodded eagerly. She was not afraid of work. That day, Momankechi taught her how to grind herbs, how to boil roots for medicine, and how to prepare healing salves. As the days turned into weeks, Oma learned the ways of the healer. She worked hard, waking before dawn to fetch water, tending to the garden, and helping sick villagers who came to Momankechi for help. For the first time since losing Nedi and Ifeoma, Oma felt safe. The first test. One evening, a young boy was brought to the hut, his face pale with fever. His mother was weeping. Please, help my son. Momankechi examined the child, her face serious. He has been cursed by the night spirits, the mother wailed. But Momankechi shook her head. No, it is not a curse. He has a fever from an infection. We must treat it quickly. She turned to Oma. You have learned much. Prepare the medicine. Oma's heart pounded. Could she do this? Taking a deep breath, she crushed the dried leaves into powder, mixed them with boiled water, and helped the boy drink it. Momankechi watched in approval. Good. Over the next few days, Oma cared for the boy, cooling his forehead with damp cloths and making sure he took the medicine. Finally, the fever broke. The boy's mother fell to her knees, crying with joy. You saved my son, she said, holding Oma's hands. For the first time in a long time, Oma felt a deep sense of purpose building a life. Over time, Oma became known in the village as Momankechi's apprentice. People came to her for remedies, for advice, and for healing. But even as she built a new life, her heart still ached for what she had lost. She missed Nedi and Ifeoma. She missed the farm. She missed the land that was meant to be hers. And in the quiet of the night, she would whisper to herself, one day, I will return. The news that changed everything. One day, a traveler arrived in the village, speaking of distant lands. Oma listened carefully as he talked about his journey. There is trouble in Yumis, he said. The great farm of Nedi and Ifeoma has fallen into ruin. Oma's breath caught in her throat. What do you mean? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. The traveler shook his head. Their relatives took the land, but they are greedy and careless. The farm is failing. The workers have left. The village is beginning to turn against them. Oma's hands clenched into fists. Everything Adana and the others had stolen was falling apart. This was her chance. Her chance to take back what was rightfully hers. I must go back, Oma whispered to herself. I must return to my home. The journey begins. That night, Oma packed a small bundle of food and supplies. Momankechi watched her silently before speaking. You are ready, child, she said. But remember, revenge will not bring you peace. Justice, however, will. Oma nodded. She would not return as a helpless girl. She would return with wisdom, strength, and a plan. She would reclaim her home. She would restore what had been stolen. And she would prove to everyone that she was not just an orphan, they had underestimated her strength. With the rising sun, Oma set out on her journey back to Yumis. Her destiny awaited. The gathering storm. As Oma walked along the winding paths leading back to Yumis, the village of her childhood, her heart was a storm of emotions. Anger. Hope. Determination. She had left as an orphan, cast out and humiliated. But she was returning as a woman of wisdom and strength. The journey was long, but she was not the same helpless girl who had once been exiled. She carried the knowledge of healing, the resilience of survivor, and a burning fire for justice. With each step, she whispered the same vow to herself. I will take back what is mine. A village in decline. When Oma finally arrived at the outskirts of Yumi's, she immediately noticed something was different. The once thriving fields of Nedi and Ifeoma's farm were now barren and neglected. The maize, once tall and golden, was stunted and dry. The workers, who once tended the land with pride, were now absent. The farm had become a shadow of what it once was. She walked deeper into the village, where the marketplace used to be lively and filled with cheerful voices. Now, there was a sense of unease in the air. As she passed familiar faces, villagers whispered among themselves. Some pointed at her in surprise. Is that not the girl they cast out? She looks different. Stronger. Maybe she has come back for revenge. Oma ignored the murmurs. She had not come for revenge, she had come for justice. But first, she needed to find out what had happened in her absence. A friend's warning. At the far end of the market, Oma spotted a familiar face, Chike. He was a childhood friend, one of the few who had always treated her kindly. He was stacking bags of grain at his family's store when he turned and saw her. His eyes widened. Oma. She smiled faintly. It's been a long time, Chike. Chike dropped the sack in his hands and rushed forward. I thought I would never see you again. His joy quickly turned into concern. Why have you come back? It's dangerous for you here. Oma frowned. Dangerous? What do you mean? Chike glanced around cautiously before lowering his voice. Aunt Adana has become worse. She rules the farm like a tyrant. She sold most of the land for quick money, but now even the wealthy traders have abandoned her because the farm is failing. Oma clenched her fist. And the workers? Chike sighed. Most of them left. The few who remained are mistreated and underpaid. Your parents' dream, it's all been destroyed. Oma's heart ached. Chike continued, worse, Adana still speaks badly of you. She told the elders that you were a curse to the family, that you would ruin everything if you ever returned. Oma's jaw tightened. Then I must prove her wrong. Chike shook his head. She will not let you take back what is yours without a fight. Oma's eyes darkened with resolve. Let her try. The first confrontation. That evening, Oma made her way to the farm. As she approached the once familiar house, she saw Aunt Adana seated on the porch, sipping from a carved wooden cup, dressed in fine cloth. Despite her wealth, there was something different about her. Her face was thinner, her eyes sunken with worry. She had been losing control. The moment Aunt Adana saw Oma, her grip on the cup tightened. Her lips curled into a sneer. What are you doing here? She spat. Oma stood tall. I have come to reclaim my home. Adana laughed, though there was a hint of nervousness in her voice. Your home. You were never a true part of this family. You are nothing but a beggar who should have stayed gone. Oma took a step forward. The farm is dying under your hands. You have failed. Adana's face twisted with fury. How dare you? But before she could finish, a group of villagers gathered nearby, watching the confrontation. Whispers spread. She speaks the truth. The farm is not what it used to be. Maybe the girl has returned to restore what was lost. Oma saw the flicker of doubt in Adana's eyes. She was losing the people's trust. Still, Adana was not ready to surrender. You have no proof that this farm belongs to you, she snapped. The elders cast you out. The land is mine. Oma held her ground. Then let the elders decide again. A challenge. A silence fell over the crowd. If the elders agreed to reconsider, Adana's lies would be exposed. Adana's lips pressed into a thin line. She had no choice but to accept. A plan for justice. That night, Oma met with Chaik and a few villagers who still remembered her parents' kindness. "We need proof," Chaik said. "Something that will convince the elders that Adana has been lying." Oma nodded. "We will gather the workers who suffered under her rule. We will show them the documents my parents left behind. And we will let the people see the truth." The villagers whispered in agreement. For too long, they had been silent. Now, they were ready to speak the elders' judgment. The next morning, the entire village gathered at the elders' meeting place. Oma stood in the center, facing Adana, the elders, and the watching villagers. "This farm belongs to me," Oma declared. "It was my parents' land. They took me in as their daughter, raised me to love and care for it. Adana has done nothing but destroy it." Adana scoffed. "You are a liar. You have no proof." Oma turned to the crowd. One by one, former farm workers stepped forward, speaking of Adana's greed, her cruelty, and the way she had sold off the land piece by piece. A man held up an old document, Nedi and Ifeoma's will. It clearly stated that the farm was meant to belong to their child. Uma. The crowd erupted in murmurs. She was telling the truth. Adana tricked us. The chief elder stepped forward, his gaze heavy. "Adana, do you deny these claims?" Adana opened her mouth, but no words came. She had been exposed. Victory and a new beginning. The elders deliberated, and by sunset, the decision was made. Oma is the rightful heir of the farm. Adana and her allies are to leave at once. A stunned silence followed, then a roar of approval from the villagers. Justice had been served. Adana was dragged from the farm, her wealth and power gone. Oma stood at the entrance, watching as her family's land was finally returned to her. She had won. But the fight was not over. Now, she had to rebuild everything that had been lost. As the first stars appeared in the sky, Oma knelt down, running her fingers through the soil. She whispered, "We will bring you back to life." The journey was just beginning. The trial of truth. The farm stood silent in the early morning mist, as if waiting for its new mistress to reclaim it. Oma stood at the entrance, her feet pressing into the soil that had once thrived under the care of Nedi and Ifeoma. Now, it was dry, neglected, a shadow of its former glory. She took a deep breath. This was not just about land. This was about restoring her parents' legacy, proving her place in the family, and rebuilding what had been stolen from her. But the battle was not yet over. The elders had declared her the rightful heir, but not everyone in the village agreed. Adana and her allies still held influence, and there were many who hesitated, unsure if Oma was truly capable of restoring what had been lost. She needed to win the people's trust. And she knew exactly how to do it. Rebuilding begins. The very next day, Oma gathered the few workers who remained. Some were skeptical, others hesitant, but when she stepped forward and addressed them, her voice was steady. "This land is ours to rebuild." She bent down, digging her fingers into the dry soil. "My parents taught me that land is like family. If we care for it, it will care for us." One by one, the workers stepped forward, drawn by her determination. The first to join her was Is, an older man who had worked on the farm for years before Adana took over. "I remember when this land flourished," he said. "If you can bring it back, I will stand by you." Others followed. By midday, the farm was alive with movement. Oma led the charge, digging, planting, and watering alongside the workers. She refused to stand idly by, proving through action that she was not just a girl seeking revenge, she was a leader. The villagers watched. Whispers turned into curiosity. Curiosity turned into respect. Adana strikes back. But Adana had not given up. She watched from a distance, her once proud face twisted with anger. Her downfall had come too quickly, too humiliatingly. She had lost everything, her power, her wealth, her allies. But she still had one card left to play. That night, she gathered a handful of supporters, relatives who still clung to their greed, unwilling to accept that the farm now belonged to Omar. She is young, Adana sneered. She will fail. And when she does, we will be there to take back what is ours. They would wait. They would sabotage her efforts. And when the villagers saw her weakness, they would turn against her. Adana's downfall was not yet complete. She would fight to take back what she had lost. A test of strength. Days turned into weeks, and Omar's farm began to show signs of life. The soil, once cracked and dry, now held tiny green sprouts. The workers, once hesitant, now walked with energy and pride. The villagers watched in awe. She is doing what Adana could not. She is just like her parents. Maybe she truly belongs here. But Adana's revenge was coming. One morning, Omar awoke to shouts from the fields. She rushed outside and found that the irrigation channels had been destroyed. Water meant to nourish the crops was spilling uselessly into the dirt. Her heart pounded. Someone had sabotaged their work. She knew who it was. Adana. Omar clenched her fist. She would not let this stop her. She called the workers together. This is a test, she told them. We will not be defeated. We will rebuild, and we will do it stronger. Instead of despairing, she worked harder. She redesigned the irrigation system, making it more resistant to sabotage. She kept watch at night, ensuring no more destruction came to the farm. And when the villagers saw her strength, their respect grew. Adana's plan had failed. A challenge of honor. With each passing day, Omar gained more support. The village chief took notice. One evening, he called for a public meeting. Before the entire village, he turned to Adana. You have caused harm to this farm, to your own family, he said. You have tried to destroy what belongs to Omar. Adana raised her chin defiantly. She is young. She does not deserve this land. The chief frowned. Then let her prove herself. A murmur spread through the crowd. A challenge. If Omar truly deserved to rule the farm, she would face a final test. The elders would set a challenge of leadership and skill. If Omar failed, she would leave the village forever. If she succeeded, Adana would never be allowed to interfere again. The entire village waited for Omar's answer. The night was silent, all eyes on her. Then she stepped forward. I accept. The trial begins. The challenge was set. Omar was given 1 moon cycle, 28 days, to prove that she could restore the farm. The rules were simple. If the farm thrived, she would be declared the rightful heir forever. If it failed, she would be cast out, never to return. Adana smirked. She believed Omar would fail. The land was too damaged. The challenge was impossible. But Omar was ready. With her workers and the villagers behind her, she threw herself into the task. She worked from dawn to dusk. She used every lesson Mama Nkechi had taught her, how to nurture the soil, how to mix natural fertilizers, how to plant for the changing seasons. She called upon the elders for wisdom, the farmers for strength, and the people for unity. The farm became a place of healing, not just for the land, but for the people. And slowly, life returned. The final judgment. On the 28th day, the entire village gathered at the farm. The elders walked through the fields. The crops stood tall, green, and full of life. The workers stood proud, no longer afraid. The villagers looked upon Omar with admiration. And the chief turned to Adana. You have lost, he said. You sought to destroy this farm. Omar has restored it. He faced the crowd. Let it be known that from this day forward, Omar is the true heir. This farm will never again be stolen from her. A roar of approval swept through the village. Omar had won. Adana, defeated, left the village in disgrace. And as Omar stood among the golden fields, she knew her parents' legacy had been restored. Rebuilding and redemption. The farm had been restored, but Omar's true work was just beginning. She had won the trial. The land was rightfully hers. But winning the farm back was not enough. She had to ensure that it thrived, not just for herself, but for the entire village. As the sun rose over the fields, she gathered the workers and villagers. This is not just my home, she told them. This farm belongs to all of us. It is the heart of Yumi's, and together, we will make it stronger than ever. A new era had begun. The first steps of change. Omar set to work immediately. She brought back the old farming traditions that had made her parents' land so prosperous: crop rotation, irrigation, and community farming. She listened to the wisdom of the elders and combined it with the new techniques she had learned from Momankechi. Within weeks, the difference was visible. The soil became rich again. The crops grew tall and healthy. The workers, once beaten down by Adana's greed, now labored with pride and hope. The village chief watched with approval as the farm flourished. You have proven yourself, Omar, he told her. Your parents would be proud. An unexpected visitor. One evening, as Omar walked through the fields, she noticed a familiar figure standing at the entrance to the farm. Adana. She looked different, her once fine clothes were now dusty and worn. The arrogance in her eyes had faded, replaced with something else. Regret. Why are you here? Omar asked, her voice firm but not unkind. Adana hesitated, then lowered her gaze. I have lost everything, she admitted. I see now what I have done. I was blinded by greed, and I wronged you, Omar. The words were hard for her to say. I do not expect forgiveness, Adana continued, but I wanted you to know. I am sorry. Omar studied her for a long moment. This was the woman who had stolen her home, turned the village against her, and nearly destroyed everything her parents had built. But hatred was a heavy burden. And Omar had carried enough pain in her life. I will not forget what you did, she said at last. But I will not let bitterness rule my heart. Adana nodded slowly. She had expected anger, even hatred, but Omar's strength was greater than vengeance. With a final glance at the farm, Adana turned and walked away. She would not return. A farm for the people. With Adana gone for good, Omar focused on making the farm not just a place of work, but a home for the village. She opened the doors to orphans and widows, ensuring that no child in Yumi's would suffer as she once had. She started teaching young girls how to farm, breaking the old belief that only men could work the land. She held community feasts, sharing the harvest with everyone, rich or poor. Slowly, Yumi's changed. And Omar became more than just the farm's owner. She became its heart. The return of an old friend. One evening, as the sky turned red with the setting sun, Chak arrived at the farm. He had left the village for a time, traveling to nearby towns, but now he had come back. Omar greeted him with a smile. You're back. Chak grinned. I heard that the great farm of Yumi's has risen again. I had to see it for myself. They walked through the fields together, reminiscing about the past. I always knew you would return, Chak said. But I never imagined you would change everything. Omar laughed softly. Neither did I. There was something different about the way Chak looked at her now, admiration, pride, and perhaps something more. But for now, Omar's heart belonged to the land. She had fought for it. She had suffered for it. And now, she would make sure it thrived. A legacy restored. Seasons passed, and the farm became more than just a place of crops and harvest. It became a home for the lost, a shelter for the weak, and a beacon of hope. People from other villages came to learn from Oma, inspired by her strength and wisdom. And the elders, who had once doubted her, now spoke of her as one of the greatest leaders Yumis had ever known. One evening, as Oma stood in the fields, watching the crops sway gently in the wind, she felt a deep peace settle in her heart. She had fought for this land. She had nearly lost everything. But in the end, she had proven that she was more than an orphan. She was the daughter of Nedi and Ifeoma. And she was exactly where she was meant to be. The legacy lives on. The farm was alive once more. The land, once barren, now stretched green and golden under the sun. The air was filled with the scent of rich soil, blooming flowers, and ripening crops. Laughter echoed from the farmhouse, where children played freely, orphans and widows who had found shelter under Oma's care. She had done it. She had restored what was lost. But her journey was not yet over. The elders' final verdict. One morning, Oma was summoned before the village elders. The chief, an old man with wise eyes, spoke. Oma, you have proven your right to this land. He looked around the village square, where hundreds had gathered. But this farm is more than just land. It is the heart of Yumis. And you have become its leader. A murmur spread through the crowd. Leader. Oma stepped forward, confused. I only wish to restore my parents' legacy. The chief smiled. And you have done more than that? You have restored the village's spirit. You have given to the people, healed the sick, and ensured no child is left behind. He turned to the villagers. Do you all agree that Oma should be our new village leader? A thunderous cheer erupted. Yes. Oma. 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 She stood in shock. She had never imagined this. She had never wanted power, only justice. But now, standing among her people, she understood. This was her home. Her destiny was not just to protect the land, but to lead its people. Taking a deep breath, she bowed her head in acceptance. I will serve you, miss, with all my heart. The village erupted in celebration. A farm for the future. As time passed, Oma expanded the farm beyond just crops. She built a school, where children learned both farming and knowledge from the outside world. She created a healing center, where people from nearby villages came to be treated, combining Momankechi's wisdom with modern herbal medicine. She ensured that no child in Yumis would ever go hungry again. And when people spoke of her, they did not call her an orphan anymore. They called her Oma, the daughter of the land. A familiar face returns. One evening, as Oma stood on the farmhouse porch, watching the fields bathed in moonlight, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned. Chaik. He had left again to trade in distant villages, but now, he had returned. You have done it, Oma, he said, admiration in his voice. She smiled. Not alone. The people made this possible. He stepped closer. And what about you? He asked softly. Have you found what you were looking for? She looked around her. At the farm, at the people she loved, at the future she had built. Yes, she whispered. And as Chek took her hand, she realized that after all the pain, all the loss, she had finally found peace. The legacy lives on. Years later, as Oma stood at the edge of the farm, watching the children play among the fields, she heard a voice behind her. Mama Oma. She turned to see a young girl, one of the orphans she had taken in, running towards her. The maize is ready to harvest, the girl exclaimed, beaming. Oma laughed, ruffling the child's hair. Then let's get to work. Together, they walked into the fields, hand in hand. The farm had been restored. The village had been healed. And Omar's legacy would live on forever. The end. Final message. This is a tale of resilience, justice, and love. Omar was cast out, betrayed, and left with nothing, but she never gave up. She proved that true strength comes not from birth, but from the heart. And in the end, she did not just reclaim her home, she built a future for everyone.